I never imagined that my life could change in an instant. But there I was, sitting on a park bench, watching the autumn leaves fall, wondering how I had let everything slip away. My name is Mark Thompson, an ordinary guy living in Oakwood, a small town in the USA. I had a loving wife, Sarah, a job I enjoyed, and a comfortable home. On the surface, everything seemed perfect. But like the leaves around me, the beauty of my life was about to fade. I remember the day I first met Sarah. It was at a local coffee shop, and she was sitting at a corner table, engrossed in a novel. I was struck by her laughter as she talked animatedly with a friend. That day, I found the courage to introduce myself, and we hit it off immediately. Our connection was magnetic, and it didn't take long for us to become inseparable. We spent countless hours dreaming about our future together, painting a picture of a life filled with love, laughter, and adventure. Fast forward a few years, and we were happily married. Our home was filled with the warmth of shared memories, family dinners, movie nights, and lazy Sundays spent in each other's company. Sarah was my best friend, my confidant, and the love of my life. She had a way of making everything feel right, even when the world around us was chaotic. But even in a seemingly perfect life, cracks can form. I started to notice subtle changes. The spark in our conversations began to dim, replaced by routine and complacency. We were both busy with our jobs, Sarah as a school teacher and I as a project manager at a tech firm. Our evenings became filled with tired sighs and distant gazes as we scrolled through our phones rather than sharing our days. As I reflect on those moments, I can't help but feel a twinge of sadness. I loved Sarah dearly, but the connection we once had felt like it was slipping away. I often brushed it off, thinking it was just a phase of life, a temporary lull in the whirlwind of marriage. But deep down, I knew something was amiss. It was during this time of unease that I began to appreciate the little things. Sarah would surprise me with my favorite dinner or leave sweet notes in my briefcase. Her laughter still brought joy, but I often found myself distracted, caught up in work or scrolling through social media, where everyone else's lives seemed more exciting than mine. I want to take a moment to appreciate you, my subscribers. Thank you for joining me on this journey as I share my experiences. If you enjoy these stories, please consider subscribing and turning on notifications. There's so much more to come, and I hope to inspire you with each story. As I settled into my routine, the mundane became my comfort. I often thought to myself, this is what life is. However, the truth was that I was slowly drifting away from the very person I love the most. I didn't realize that my heart was beginning to wander, seeking something I couldn't quite define. Little did I know that a chance encounter would soon change everything. It was a typical Tuesday morning when I met Jessica. She was a new hire at my company, bright-eyed and full of ambition. I was assigned to train her, and right from the start, there was an undeniable chemistry. She had a way of lighting up the room, and I found myself drawn to her energy. The first few meetings were professional, filled with discussions about projects and deadlines. But as the days turned into weeks, our conversations shifted. We started sharing more than just work-related topics. Jessica was funny, and her perspective on life was refreshing. I found myself looking forward to our interactions, craving the lightness she brought into my otherwise monotonous days. I could feel the danger lurking, but I brushed it aside, thinking it was harmless. After all, I was a devoted husband, right? I loved Sarah, and I would never betray her. Yet, the allure of this new friendship began to gnaw on my conscience. I often caught myself daydreaming about Jessica, imagining what it would be like to be with someone who made me feel alive again. As I navigated through this emotional maze, a storm was brewing beneath the surface. My perfect life was on the verge of unraveling, and I was blissfully unaware of the consequences that awaited me. The choices I would soon make would forever alter the course of my life, a lesson I was yet to learn. With every passing day, the tension between my loyalty to Sarah and my growing feelings for Jessica intensified. I felt like a tightrope walker, balancing precariously between two worlds. The perfect life I had built began to feel like a fragile facade, and the truth was lurking, ready to expose itself in the most dramatic way. In the heart of Oakwood, where dreams were supposed to flourish, I was about to step into a whirlwind that would challenge everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and the consequences of infidelity. The days turned into weeks, and I found myself increasingly captivated by Jessica. Our conversations evolved from casual exchanges about work to personal stories and dreams. I learned about her passion for art, her love for hiking, and her aspirations of traveling the world. Each shared moment felt like a thread weaving us closer together, and I couldn't help but feel that she was awakening a part of me that had long been dormant. It was during lunch breaks at a nearby cafe that our bond truly began to take shape. We would sit for hours, laughing and discussing everything from our favorite books to our childhood memories. I was astonished by how much I enjoyed her company, and each moment spent together felt like a breath of fresh air. I started to look forward to those lunchtime escapes, relishing the excitement of our secret conversations. At home, I tried to push these feelings aside. I'd remind myself of Sarah's unwavering support and the life we had built together. But every time I saw Jessica, the internal struggle grew more intense. I could feel my heart racing in her presence, a feeling I hadn't experienced in years. The thrill of our flirtation made me feel alive, but I also felt a pang of guilt wash over me. I loved Sarah, didn't I? How could I be entertaining thoughts of another woman? I remember one particularly crisp autumn afternoon. Jessica and I had decided to take our lunch outdoors. We found a quiet spot in a nearby park, surrounded by the vibrant colors of changing leaves. The sun filtered through the branches above, casting a warm glow around us. As we talked, I noticed the way she smiled, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. It was intoxicating. "Mark, have you ever thought about what you would do if you could just drop everything and go on an adventure?" she asked, her voice playful. I chuckled, trying to brush off the question. I have a good life. I'm not sure I want to give it all up. But what if you could? She pressed, leaning slightly closer. What if you could travel to places you've only dreamed of? Live life on your own terms. Her words resonated with me more than I wanted to admit. I felt a wave of longing wash over me. The routine of my life felt stifling, and the idea of adventure seemed so appealing. I found myself imagining a different life, one filled with spontaneity and passion. But then there was Sarah, waiting for me at home, filled with love and warmth. In that moment, I felt a flicker of something dangerous. It was the thrill of the unknown, the temptation of something new. I could feel my heart racing, and I knew I had to tread carefully. But the more I resisted, the more I felt drawn to Jessica. The next few days were a blur of conflicting emotions. I would go home and try to engage with Sarah, but my mind would often drift back to Jessica. Each time I saw her, it was like a spark igniting a fire within me. I was acutely aware of the line I was tiptoeing, and the thrill of flirting with danger was both exhilarating and terrifying. One evening, after a particularly long day at work, I found myself at a bar with Jessica and a few other colleagues. The atmosphere was lively, filled with laughter and music. Jessica looked stunning, her hair cascading over her shoulders as she animatedly shared story. I couldn't take my eyes off her. As the night wore on and drinks flowed, the energy shifted. We found ourselves standing close, our laughter mingling with a charged silence. "Let's go for a walk," Jessica suggested, her eyes glinting with mischief. I hesitated, the rational part of my brain screaming at me to turn back, but the allure of the moment was too strong. We stepped outside into the cool night air, the stars twinkling above us. "Isn't it beautiful?" she said, gesturing to the sky. I nodded, but my focus was on her. As we walked along the dimly lit street, our shoulders brushed against each other, and I felt a rush of adrenaline. The air was thick with unspoken words, and I could sense the tension building between us. My heart raced as we stopped under a street lamp, illuminating her face. She looked up at me, and for a moment, everything else faded away. "Mark," she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. "Do you ever feel like there's something more out there?" Her question hung in the air like a challenge. I could feel my resolve wavering. I do, I admitted, my voice heavy with the weight of my honesty. In that moment, I was torn between the life I had and the thrill of the unknown. I could feel the pull of temptation, the excitement of what could be. But I also felt the crushing weight of my loyalty to Sarah. I was standing at a crossroads, and the path I chose could change everything. As we stood there, I could see the flicker of hope in Jessica's eyes. It was intoxicating, and I realized I was dangerously close to crossing a line I could never uncross. I took a step back, my heart pounding. "We should get back," I said, trying to regain my composure. She looked disappointed, and I felt a pang of regret. "You're right. Let's go," she replied, her voice tinged with an emotion I couldn't quite place. The walk back felt heavier, the air thick with tension. I knew I had to distance myself from Jessica, but my heart was already entangled in a web of emotions I couldn't control. The thrill of our connection was powerful, but the thought of betraying Sarah loomed over me like a dark cloud. That night, as I lay in bed beside Sarah, I struggled to find peace. I could feel her warmth next to me, but my mind was consumed with thoughts of Jessica. I replayed our conversations, our laughter, and the way she looked at me, and I felt a sense of loss for something I hadn't even yet grasped. The line between friendship and something more was blurring, and I had to make a choice. But the temptation lingered, whispering sweet nothings in my ear, urging me to take a leap into the unknown. Little did I know that the decisions I made in the coming days would lead me down a path from which there would be no return. As the days passed, I became increasingly aware of how fragile my life had become. Every interaction with Jessica felt like a dangerous game, and I was no longer sure I could play it without losing everything I held dear. The following weeks unfolded in a haze of confusion and longing. I tried to maintain a facade of normalcy at home with Sarah, but the weight of my secret was suffocating. The more I attempted to suppress my feelings for Jessica, the more they bubbled to the surface, insisting on being acknowledged. Each time I saw her at work, I felt an electric charge in the air, a silent acknowledgement of the uncharted territory we were both navigating. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low in the sky, casting a golden glow through the office windows, I found myself alone with Jessica in the break room. She was making coffee, and I lingered a moment longer than necessary, watching her as she moved with grace. The sound of the coffee machine filled the silence, but it felt charged with unspoken tension. "Hey, Mark," she said, turning to me with a smile that sent my heart racing. "Do you want to join me for a hike this weekend? I know a great trail." I hesitated, the internal battle raging within me. "I'm not sure," I replied, my voice faltering. "I have some plans with Sarah." Her smile faltered slightly, and I felt a pang of guilt. "Oh, I understand. Just thought it'd be nice to escape for a bit. Let me know if you change your mind." As she walked away, I felt a sense of loss wash over me. The idea of sharing that experience with her, surrounded by nature and the promise of adventure, was tempting. But I couldn't shake the reality of my commitments at home. I knew I was standing at a precipice, and one misstep could lead to a fall from which I might never recover. That weekend, I kept my plans with Sarah. We spent the day together, enjoying a cozy brunch and wandering through the local farmer's market. But even as I smiled and engaged with her, my mind would drift to thoughts of Jessica. I stole glances at my phone, half hoping for a message from her, and each time I felt a pang of guilt wash over me. As the days turned into weeks, the tension between Jessica and me grew more pronounced. We'd steal moments together at work, sharing laughter and lingering gazes that seemed to speak volumes. I was acutely aware of the line we were both crossing, yet we danced along it, caught in a whirlwind of emotions neither of us fully understood. Then came the day that changed everything. It was a Friday evening, and the office was buzzing with excitement for the weekend ahead. Jessica approached me, her eyes sparkling with mischief. "Are you doing anything tonight?" she asked, her tone light but her gaze intense. I felt my heart race. "Just a quiet night at home," I replied, trying to sound casual, but the truth was I was tempted to say yes to whatever adventure she had in mind. Come on, let's go out. Just for one drink. You can't keep hiding from life, she teased. The thrill of spontaneity tugged at me, and before I knew it, I found myself agreeing. All right, just one drink. As we left the office together, a mix of excitement and fear surged through me. We headed to a lively bar downtown, the atmosphere vibrant with laughter and music. I tried to keep the conversation light, but as the drinks flowed and the laughter escalated, I felt the walls I had built around my feelings begin to crumble. We found a cozy corner booth, and I watched Jessica as she animatedly recounted stories from her life, her eyes sparkling with passion. In that moment, I was captivated by her spirit. The world around us faded into a blur, and it felt as if we were in our own little bubble. "Mark, you're so serious all the time. You need to let loose," she exclaimed, leaning closer. Her breath was warm, and the space between us felt charged with an undeniable energy. "I guess I could use some fun," I admitted, my heart racing as I realized how true that was. As the night unfolded, the laughter turned into deeper conversations. We talked about our dreams, our fears, and the paths we wished we could take. Each shared secret felt like another thread binding us together. Then, in a moment that felt both inevitable and terrifying, Jessica leaned in closer, her eyes searching mine. "I feel like there's something special between us, Mark," she whispered, her voice barely above a breath. "Do you feel it too?" I felt the ground shift beneath me. This was the moment I had both anticipated and dreaded. "I do," I confessed, my heart pounding. "But I'm with someone." Her expression shifted, a mix of understanding and longing. "I know, but sometimes we can't help who we're drawn to. Life is too short to ignore these feelings." The air between us thickened with tension, and I could feel the weight of the decision pressing down on me. I was at a crossroads, and the choice I made in that moment would reverberate throughout my life. I took a deep breath, knowing I had to be honest. "Jessica, I care about you, but I can't just forget about Sarah. I don't want to hurt her." Jessica's expression softened, a hint of sadness in her eyes. "I get it, and I don't want to put you in a difficult position, but I can't ignore what I feel." In that moment, the gravity of the situation crashed down upon me. I was caught in a whirlwind of emotions, torn between my loyalty to Sarah and the undeniable connection I felt with Jessica. The night wore on, and as we continued to talk, the line between right and wrong blurred further. When we finally left the bar, I knew I needed to make a choice. The thrill of the unknown was intoxicating, but the thought of betraying Sarah weighed heavily on my conscience. I walked Jessica to her car, the air thick with unspoken words. "Thank you for tonight," she said, her voice soft. "No matter what happens, I'm glad we met." As I watched her drive away, I felt a sense of loss wash over me. I was standing at a precipice, and I knew I had to confront my feelings head on. The decision I faced was monumental, and the path I chose would alter the course of my life forever. That night, as I lay in bed next to Sarah, I felt the weight of my choices pressing down on me. I couldn't escape the reality of my situation any longer. I had to confront the truth of my heart. Asterisk. The days following my decision were a blur of regret and sorrow. Each morning, I woke up to the weight of my betrayal pressing down on me like a heavy shroud. Sarah's eyes, once filled with love and trust, now reflected hurt and confusion. I could see the pain in her expression as we exchanged strained glances over breakfast, the silence between us growing thicker with each passing moment. Our conversations, once effortless and filled with laughter, turned into a series of cautious exchanges, as if we were walking on eggshells. I was acutely aware of the chasm that had formed between us, a rift that seemed insurmountable. I wanted to reach out, to explain, to apologize, but every time I tried, the words felt inadequate against the enormity of my actions. As the days turned into weeks, Sarah withdrew further into herself. The vibrant woman I had married was now a shadow, lost in her thoughts and pain. I watched helplessly as she distanced herself, spending more time with friends and family, seeking solace in their company while I remained a prisoner of my guilt. The loneliness was suffocating, and yet I knew I had brought this upon myself. I began to understand the true consequences of my actions, not just the fractures in our relationship, but the ripple effects that reached into every aspect of our lives. Friends and family noticed the change in us, their concerned looks and whispered conversations only adding to my sense of isolation. I could feel the judgment in their eyes, the unspoken questions about how I could have betrayed someone so wonderful. In those quiet moments of reflection, I was forced to confront my own demons. I questioned my motivations, my desires, and the choices I had made that led to this point. What had driven me to infidelity? Was it a moment of weakness, or something deeper and more insidious? Each answer only led to more questions, and I found myself spiraling into a vortex of self-loathing. The emotional turmoil was relentless. I experienced waves of anger towards myself, toward the circumstances that had led me here, and even towards Sarah for the pain I caused her. I felt helpless and overwhelmed, as if I were drowning in a sea of regret. The reality of my situation was a harsh teacher, and each lesson was etched into my heart with the pain of knowing what I had lost. Yet, amid the chaos, I realized that if I truly wanted to mend the broken pieces of our marriage, I needed to face the consequences of my actions head-on. I began to seek guidance, attending therapy sessions and reading books on relationships and forgiveness. I wanted to understand not only my mistakes, but also how to rebuild the trust that had been shattered. As I navigated this difficult path, I discovered that forgiveness is a complex journey. It requires vulnerability and honesty, not just from Sarah, but from myself as well. I had to confront the truth of my actions, not as a means to absolve myself, but to genuinely understand the impact they had on the person I loved most. The struggle was far from over, but I knew that facing the consequences was the first step towards healing. With each passing day, I clung to the hope that perhaps, just perhaps, there might be a way forward, a way to rebuild what had been lost and to find redemption in the ashes of my mistakes. As I sat alone in the quiet of our living room, I reflected on the tumultuous journey that had brought me to this point. The echoes of my past mistakes lingered in the air, a constant reminder of the fragility of love and trust. Yet, amid the pain, there was a flicker of hope, a possibility of redemption, and a chance to rebuild the foundations of my marriage. The first step was acknowledging the hurt I had caused Sarah. I realized that words alone could not heal the wounds, but I was determined to show her, through my actions, that I was committed to making amends. I began by listening, truly listening to her feelings and fears. I wanted to understand the depth of her pain and the impact of my betrayal on her heart. In those conversations, I learned that forgiveness is not a destination, but a process. It is messy, fraught with setbacks and missteps, but it is also a journey towards healing. I encouraged Sarah to express her emotions, to share her thoughts without fear of judgment. In doing so, I discovered the strength of vulnerability and the power of honest communication. As the weeks turned into months, we began to navigate the rocky terrain of rebuilding our relationship. We attended couples therapy, where we learned to communicate more effectively and to understand each other's needs. We set aside time for date nights, rediscovering the joy of each other's company as we reconnected with the love that had been overshadowed by betrayal. I also took the time to reflect on my own shortcomings. I realized that the infidelity was not just a moment of weakness, but a symptom of deeper issues within myself. I sought to address those issues, recognizing that true redemption required not only changing my behavior, but also understanding the underlying motivations that had led me astray. In the quiet moments of reflection, I began to appreciate the lessons learned from my mistakes. I understood that honesty is the cornerstone of any relationship, and I committed to being transparent with Sarah, even when it was uncomfortable. I learned to value the beauty of vulnerability, recognizing that it is through our imperfections that we can truly connect with one another. As I look back on the journey we had undertaken, I felt a profound sense of gratitude. The path to redemption was not easy, but it had brought us closer together. We emerged stronger, more resilient, and more in love than ever. The scars of the past would always be a part of our story, but they no longer defined us. In the end, I realized that forgiveness is not about forgetting the past, but about choosing to move forward with a renewed sense of purpose. Our marriage was a testament to the power of resilience and the importance of honesty, and I vowed to cherish that lesson for the rest of my life. As I closed my eyes, a sense of peace washed over me. I had faced the consequences of my actions, embraced the journey of redemption, and emerged with a deeper understanding of love. In that moment, I felt a renewed sense of hope for the future, a future built on trust, forgiveness, and the unwavering belief that love can endure even the darkest of storms. That's the end.